Hi, I'm Zoya. I came back from a business trip and found a note taped to the front door. If you want to stay, live in the basement. My room? Given to my sister, the golden one. No warning, no conversation, just that. They wanted me small, quiet, obedient. Instead, I vanished. 3 days later, they came knocking, all smiles, thinking I'd still pay their bills. But this time, I didn't raise my voice. I raised a boundary. And that was louder than anything they'd ever heard. Before we dive in, what would you have done in my shoes? Ever felt erased by your own family? Drop a comment. We're listening. I came back to that house after 5 days on the road, 5 days of boardrooms, endless diagrams, and corporate dinners where I smiled until my cheeks hurt. It was past midnight when I pulled into the driveway. My headlights swept across the white columns of the old colonial porch like a stage set frozen in time. The porch light flickered, casting jumpy shadows across the wood siding. Something about it made me pause. I cut the engine and sat there a moment, letting the silence wash over me. I hadn't even told them exactly when I'd be back. It was supposed to be a surprise. Maybe I wanted a warm welcome, a hug, even just a, "Hey, how was the trip?" Instead, I stepped out of my car and stopped cold. My suitcase, neatly zipped, handle extended, sat on the porch. Right beneath the flickering light, and next to it, taped to the brick wall with 2 strips of painter's tape, was an envelope. White. Folded. My name scrawled on it in my mother's handwriting. Not Zoya. Just, "For you." My stomach knotted. I peeled the envelope off the wall and opened it with trembling fingers. No, welcome back. No, we missed you. Just one line, typed, not even handwritten. If you want to stay, the basement is available. We gave your room to Delaney. Mom and Dad. I stood there for a full minute, rereading the note as if it might morph into something else if I stared hard enough. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. Just hollow. I tested my old key out of habit. It didn't fit. They'd changed the locks. I didn't knock. I didn't text. I walked around the side of the house, past the hedges I used to trim every summer, and opened the old side entrance. At least that lock hadn't been replaced. The basement door creaked like always. The must hit me first. Damp, dusty, sharp with mildew. I flipped the light. A single bulb buzzed weakly to life overhead. Boxes, so many of them. Stuff from Dad's high school years, Mom's old vinyls, and somewhere in the back, the failed Etsy shop supplies Delaney once guilted me into investing in. In the far corner, a deflated air mattress waited, a thin plaid blanket folded neatly on top, like someone had staged it. A single pillow rested on top, its stuffing misshapen and yellowed at the edges. They'd planned this. It wasn't last minute. This wasn't a mix-up. It was deliberate, and it stung more than I wanted to admit. By the cracked window, something moved in the breeze. A shell wind chime. I hadn't seen it in years. I made it for Mom when I was 10, carefully drilled holes, painted tiny dolphins on each piece. Now it was faded, chipped, covered in a layer of dust. Forgotten. Just like me. I didn't touch it. I didn't cry. I lay on that sad excuse for a mattress with my coat still on, scrolling silently through my phone until sleep took me. In the morning, the sounds above filtered down like an old radio, clinking dishes, laughter. Delaney's voice unmistakably bright and smug. "Thanks again, Mom. I'm so glad I have my own room again." My own room. The one with the blue walls I painted myself at 15. The room I remodeled for them during my college summer break. New drywall, insulation, custom shelves. All mine. Now hers. No one came downstairs. Not even a knock. Not even a passing, "Hey, how was your trip?" By noon, I stopped waiting. I opened a secure app on my phone, one I'd built quietly years ago when I first suspected this family's love came with terms. My thumbprint unlocked it. There it was, a digital file titled Sea Breeze. I tapped in. A 2-bedroom coastal apartment, lease in my name, deed held under an LLC, fully paid, fully furnished, empty, waiting. I didn't think. I just packed. At 5 a.m. the next morning, I folded the blanket, set it on the old basement chair, and left. No slamming doors, no notes, just silence. In the driveway, I paused, opened my banking app. One by one, I terminated every shared account, utilities, groceries, even the backup emergency card Mom once begged me to keep open, just in case. They didn't know I'd paid off their mortgage 6 months ago, quietly. I wanted to help them. I thought love looked like that. Turns out, it just bought them enough comfort to pretend I never mattered. As I shut the door of my new apartment hours later, ocean breeze wafting in through the window, I stared at the screen. A bank receipt glowed softly. Transfer complete, $178, $430. Mitchell Family Home Mortgage. Paid in full. I didn't scream. I didn't plead. I just left, and took every cent with me. The road curved along the shore as I pulled into the garage of my apartment. Nothing grand, just clean lines and silence I didn't have to earn. By the time the sun had climbed into the hazy sky, the house I once called home had already started humming with its usual rhythm. Only this time, I wasn't part of it. I didn't even unpack right away. I stood in the doorway for a while, letting the salty air drift in. A white sheer curtain lifted slightly with the breeze, like a quiet nod from the ocean itself. The eucalyptus candle on the counter gave off a sharp, clean scent, so different from the dampness of the basement, from mothballs and fried onions and floor cleaner. I breathed it in like I hadn't taken a full breath in weeks. The silence wasn't empty. It was restful. By mid-morning, I was stacking books on the floating shelves I'd designed myself during a winter insomnia stretch. My hands moved automatically. Fiction, design theory, the notebook I kept since college, its edges frayed from too many moves. I slipped it into the top drawer of my desk and closed it gently, like I was tucking in an old version of myself. No ceremony. Just peace. Meanwhile, 2 hours inland, at the Mitchell house, peace was fraying. Janet stood over the kitchen sink, rinsing strawberries. She didn't look up when Louis shuffled in, fumbling with his phone. "Did you forget to pay the electric bill?" she asked without turning. He blinked. "What are you talking about? It's on autopay. Zoya set that up months ago." "Well," she said flatly. "The lights just flickered and the Wi-Fi's down. Delaney was halfway through a show and now the TV's just black." Louis frowned and tapped through banking apps. That can't be right. But it was. The joint account, once neatly balanced, discreetly padded, was empty. Transaction history clean. No errors, no withdrawals. Just absence. As if the oxygen had been pulled from a room they didn't know I'd been filling. Delaney leaned on the banister, half asleep, holding a coffee mug with chipped nail polish. "You could just ask her, you know." She yawned. "Maybe her app glitched." Janet snorted. "I'm not begging her to explain herself. She knows how we operate." They always did think I'd come running, or apologizing, or smoothing things over like I used to, but silence has its own gravity. Back at my place, I was folding towels and lining them in the hall closet. There was something soothing about it, stacking what was mine, not owed. I poured myself tea and walked to the small balcony. The waves below didn't crash, they murmured. That kind of quiet becomes a teacher. Later that afternoon, I posted a photo, not for them, but because the beach light was too beautiful not to share. Just a silhouette of my legs in the sand, the caption simple, "Some homes can't be built with wood and nails." I didn't check who liked it. I didn't care if they did. But they saw it. At the Mitchell house, Delaney made a face and tossed her phone on the couch. "God, she's always so dramatic," she muttered. Still, she picked her phone back up a moment later, scrolled, stopped, tilted her head like something was out of place. She couldn't remember the last time I'd asked for anything. Not a loan, not a favor, not even help with a holiday pie, just birthdays with small gifts and quiet departures. That realization had a weight she didn't say out loud. By the next morning, Louis left a voicemail on my cell. "Hey, honey, there seems to be a glitch with the mortgage," he said with that awkward drawl he used when pretending it wasn't his fault. "You know that thing you said you'd help with? Can you check it?" I listened once, then deleted it without saving the number. He hadn't even tried to pretend it was about me or that he was concerned. Just business, like I was still the family accountant. I made no reply. That evening, a text came in from Janet. "Come for Sunday dinner. Delaney made your favorite. No, we miss you. No, we're sorry." Just a command, dressed as a kindness. I responded the next morning while steeping tea. "No. One word. Period. That was all." She didn't write back. Around noon, as the mail truck rattled past the Mitchell driveway, Louis walked down in slippers to collect the stack. Among ads and circulars sat a sleek white envelope with gold lettering. It was addressed to him. But the return address? A law firm in the coastal city. Inside was a clean, efficient letter. Notification of Zoya Mitchell's removal as co-signer on all family accounts, a statement regarding full legal transfer of her inheritance, her share of land, into a private trust. Effective immediately. Beneficiaries, not listed. Parents, explicitly excluded. Louis sat on the bottom stair rereading the letter twice. His ears turned red. When he handed it to Janet, her hands trembled slightly. Why would she do this?" she whispered. Delaney shrugged, but slower this time. "She's always been like this. Overreacting, making things bigger than they are." But as she scrolled through our old messages again, a crease formed between her brows. Nothing. No record of me needing them. No hand stretched out, just holiday greetings and silent exits. And then, nothing. Meanwhile, in the late afternoon light of my apartment, I unpacked a new wind chime. Not seashells this time. Brass, with little cut glass pieces that caught the sun. I hung it by the window, the one that overlooked the boardwalk. When the breeze came in, it didn't sound like memory. It sounded like decision. I wrapped both hands around the mug of tea, let the steam rise to my face. I wasn't angry. I wasn't planning revenge. I was just not there anymore. Not part of the group chat. Not listed on the electric bill. Not returning home for Sunday, and not available for guilt. The breeze off the ocean pressed gently through my window screen as I stood barefoot in the kitchen, stirring honey into my tea. The scent of eucalyptus had settled into the curtains, and sunlight filtered through the linen panels I'd chosen myself. No one had approved them. No one had commented on whether they matched the cushions. It was mine, every inch of it. I set the mug down and opened the envelope that had arrived that morning. A small package from the nonprofit in Portland. Inside was a child's crayon drawing. 2 hands, one brown, one peach, held a dripping paintbrush above a rainbow. Scrawled beneath it, "Thank you for letting me feel brave." I pinned it on the wall beside the window, just beneath the wind chime I'd hung the day before. This one didn't rattle like the seashell mobiles my mother once loved. It sang deeper. Brass and glass caught the light and cast soft fragments onto the hardwood floor. And for the first time in a long while, I exhaled without checking who might be listening. Back at the Mitchell house, silence had turned from golden to grating. Delaney stormed into the kitchen one gray afternoon, pulling open drawers like she was searching for a lost passport. "Where's the blender?" she snapped. Janet didn't look up from her tablet. "What blender?" "The one I always use, for smoothies. It was right here." "Oh, the fancy one." Janet waved a hand. "That was Zoya's, along with the knives and all those spices." Delaney's voice dropped. "Are you serious? She took the paprika too?" Janet finally looked up. "Ask your sister." "Oh, wait. You can't." Delaney rolled her eyes but didn't answer. She opened the fridge, only to find it half-stocked and leaking at the bottom. The cool air no longer hummed evenly, the temperature dial blinking in error. Louis, upstairs in his home office, sat sweating in front of his computer. The thermostat wouldn't budge. He clicked the app he used for years, one Zoya had always kept running and adjusted remotely. The login failed. Again. Then again. Incorrect password. Try again. "Janet," he called. "Do you have Zoya's login for the Nest system?" "Do I look like her secretary?" She snapped from downstairs. Even their printer, once perfectly maintained, now blinked red. Out of ink. And this time, no automated refill. No quiet magic that made things just work. At brunch the next Sunday, Janet tried to keep appearances. Her old friend Vivian leaned across the table, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Haven't seen Zoya at the alumni board meetings lately," she said casually. Janet forced a tight smile. "She's on a trip," Delaney added. "She needed space. You know how she is." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "Oh, sure, but she's still covering those art scholarships, right?" Janet blinked. Delaney glanced down at her phone. Neither spoke. Vivian sipped her coffee. "She always said, 'Don't let the paintbrush dry out, remember?'" Then she laughed, as if expecting them to join. But the moment passed too quietly. Later that week, Delaney stood at a boutique downtown, holding a soft cashmere coat against her frame. She walked confidently to the counter, handing over the black card marked Mitchell Household. Declined. She frowned and tried again. The young clerk smiled politely but didn't offer a third attempt. Delaney stepped away, dialing her mother. "Mom, did you cancel the family card?" "No," Janet answered, confused. Then a new message buzzed in. "Cardholder privileges revoked by ZM." Janet didn't speak for several seconds. Delaney lowered the phone slowly. She really cut us off. Back at home, Louis drafted a group text from his study. "You're always so emotional. No one kicked you out. You left." The message sat, cold and crafted to manipulate, just the way he liked it. But Zoya didn't respond. Instead, a quiet bomb appeared on her social media later that night. A photo of the handwritten note they'd taped to her door months ago. "If you want to stay, live in the basement." The caption beneath it read simply, "History has witnesses." The comments came quickly. A few people gasped. A few sent hearts. But her silence beneath it said more than any reply ever could. At the Mitchell house, Janet had begun pulling bedsheets from Zoya's old room. She threw open windows, dusted off the dresser, lit lavender candles. "She won't be back," she muttered. "No need for it to smell like her." That night, the bed frame creaked. A door down the hall moaned open. Delaney sat up straight. "Mom?" she whispered. Nothing. She padded to the hallway, barefoot, hearing something faint, like laughter, soft, almost teasing. But no one was there. A few days later, I met Professor Layton, my mentor from college, for lunch in a small cafe by the marina. She always wore too many bangles and never apologized for her red lipstick bleeding slightly into the lines around her mouth. I love that about her. As we picked at slices of avocado toast, she leaned forward. "You okay?" she asked, not as a formality but as someone who'd taught me how to survive critique. I stirred my iced tea and said, "You ever realize home was just a place that survived off your silence?" She watched me for a moment, eyes soft. "Sometimes silence is expensive." I nodded. That night, I sat by the window sipping tea. The wind chime sang gently, shimmering in the moonlight. The child's drawing still fluttered in its pin. I reached out, smoothing the corner, and in that small, quiet moment, I knew this was where I chose to belong. Sometimes, your loudest statement is simply not showing up. The message sat in my inbox, unopened. "Hope you're well," it read in the preview bar. From Janet, of course. I didn't need to click it to know it was hollow. Not apology, not accountability, just a weak olive branch tossed from a sinking ship. I shut my laptop and poured tea into my favorite chipped mug, the one I kept from the old house before I walked out. That mug had survived more tantrums and slammed doors than I could count. Now it lived in peace. And so did I. Back in the Mitchell house, peace was running on empty. Janet and Louis sat across from each other at the kitchen table, barely touching their coffee. A stack of envelopes lay between them, red-lettered reminders of what happens when the one you underestimated stops paying the bills. "No gas?" Louis muttered, flipping open the notice. Janet didn't look up. "You were supposed to set that up." Louis exhaled through his nose. "She did. Zoya did all of it. The utilities, the mortgage auto payments, even the trash pickup. It was all in her systems," Janet scoffed. "She didn't do that much." But neither spoke after that. The silence between them said more than either would admit. They weren't arguing about gas or phone service. They were arguing about how they let their backbone walk out the front door. By noon, the house felt colder. Not because the heat was off, though it was, but because the tension wrapped itself around the air like static. Delaney came downstairs with a shopping bag and a worried look. "Mom, I need to borrow $300. The boutique held the coat for me, but they won't keep it another day." Janet didn't even blink. "I can do $100. "What? I need the full—" "Then figure it out," Janet said, eyes still locked on a late notice. Delaney's voice rose. "You always did this. You coddled her and left me to twist. I'm not Zoya." Janet slammed her palm on the table. "Exactly." The room froze. Even Louis flinched. Delaney blinked, stunned by the slap of honesty. "You know what? Don't worry about it." She grabbed her bag, turned, and left the room without another word. Across town, I was mopping the small balcony outside my kitchen when the doorbell buzzed. I wasn't expecting anyone. Most people texted before they came. I wiped my hands, tightened the tie of my cardigan, and opened the door. Standing there was a man I hadn't seen in years. Tall, quiet, always carried himself like a man who never needed to say much. Terrence Brooks. "Terrence," I said slowly. He nodded, holding a slim manila envelope in one hand. "Hey Zoya, they sent me to find you, but I didn't come for them." He stepped inside, polite as ever. I offered tea. He accepted. We sat in the sunlight near my window, and the kettle hissed behind us. He slid the envelope across the table. "You should see what's inside." My fingers hesitated before pulling out the pages. Legal forms, loan documents, co-signed property files, my name in ink again and again. Signatures dated during college, and later. All the times I thought I was helping the family, just for a little while. "They used my credit," I whispered. "My name, to keep their image clean." Terrence nodded. "You weren't just the helper, Zoya. You were the foundation." I stared at one form in particular, our family's old mortgage refinance. I remembered delaying my grad school start date so I could sign it. Louis said I was the only one with stable income at the time. I didn't question it. I just wanted to help. And that was the pattern, wasn't it? The 2 a.m. shifts, the credit cards Delaney racked up for school, but the charges were always Sephora and Cancun. "You're the responsible one," Janet always said. "You'll understand." And I did, for far too long. Terrence saw the flicker in my face. "If you want to go after them, I can help." I looked up. "I'm not interested in revenge." He nodded slowly. "But I'm not going to pretend it didn't happen either." I reached for my scanner. "I'll start by recording it. That's enough for now." Later that week, I opened my rooftop to 3 women I'd met through a local community art group, survivors of family estrangement, women who, like me, had carried silence too long. I displayed 4 new paintings, abstracts in deep, aching tones. One woman stood in front of the 3rd canvas, her voice soft. "You make grief feel like a color I can finally name." I smiled at her. "That's the point." We shared tea and quiet stories under hanging lights. For once, I wasn't explaining myself. I wasn't performing forgiveness. I was simply present. And that was more than I'd ever been allowed to be back home. That night, back at the Mitchell house, Janet sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. She typed, "We didn't mean it like that." Paused, then deleted it. Typed again, "Hope you're well." Sent. I saw it pop up the next morning. Just those 3 words, no punctuation. I let it sit in my notifications for a moment. Then I tapped it open, read. I didn't reply. Some messages didn't need a response. Some wounds didn't need words. Some olive branches, they didn't deserve water. The text came at 8:12 a.m. "Delinquent taxes, you need to fix this." No greeting, no signature, just entitlement on display. I didn't reply. 2 hours later, I sat in my sunlit studio with a brush in hand, mixing a soft coral with a muted gray. The colors blended like breath and bruises, quietly honest. Behind me, a soft knock on the glass door. I turned. It was Terrence. He stepped inside, always respectful enough to stay at the edge of the canvas tarp. He didn't speak until I set the brush down. "They got the notice," he said quietly. "Your name's not on it, but they assumed you'd handle it." "Of course they did." "They say the house was never really yours," he added, almost apologetically. "But they're panicking now." "Let them," I replied, not looking up. That same afternoon, I hosted an event in the courtyard. Healing through color. Not a gallery opening, just a quiet circle. Folding chairs, warm cider, and stories that needed air. As the sun dipped behind the sea, women I barely knew spoke about their own families, control masked as love, silence as survival. One woman said, "You're painting." It gave me a word for what I've been carrying. I didn't say thank you. I just nodded. That was the whole point. Around 7, while I was helping fold chairs and refill tea, I noticed a car parked across the street. Beige, polished, familiar. Janet. She got out like she was stepping into Sunday service, hair curled, lipstick fresh, a thin scarf tossed over one shoulder like she expected to be admired. She walked up the steps, acting like she belonged there. "Zoya," she beamed, as if nothing had happened. "I didn't know you were hosting. We were just talking about how much we miss you." "We?" "Well, Delaney too. She's just been under stress lately." I let her stand there, waiting. She reached up, tucked a strand of my hair behind my ear, just like she used to when I was little and sad. I stepped back. "You gave my room away," I said, "to someone who never paid a bill, who never gave anything back." She laughed nervously, brushing it off. "Zoya, families fight. We say things. We overreact." "No," I said, my voice calm. "Families sometimes break, and sometimes they stay broken for a reason." Her smile faltered. Across the street, parked out of sight, Terrence sat in his car. Engine off, microphone on. In my ear, barely audible, his voice came through the tiny earpiece. "It's recording." Janet tried again. "You were always good at the boring stuff, the bills, the paperwork. We had to pick someone who would shine. Delaney's always had that in her. You were just stable." Stable. Like an appliance. Like a wrench in the drawer they forgot they needed. I kept my face neutral. But something in me shifted. Later that night, when the last guest had gone, I checked my phone. The community center had reposted pictures from the art show. Comments poured in. Notes about healing, about courage. Delaney's name showed up too. A tweet. "Some people profit off pain. No name, no context, but everyone knew." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The next morning, I dressed simply. Jeans, sweater, clean hair pulled into a bun, and went downtown. The county clerk's office was beige and quiet. I sat at the counter, signed forms, removed my name from every utility, tax account, and joint record tied to the Mitchell name. I walked outside. The air smelled like salt and jasmine. And freedom. That weekend, Delaney met up with her old college friends for brunch, trying, as usual, to reclaim her glow. She laughed too loudly, rolled her eyes when my name came up. "Zoya's painting about forgiveness or something. It's all a stunt," she said, sipping a mimosa. But one woman looked up and said, "Actually, that exhibit helped my sister talk to her kids again." Delaney's face froze. The smile evaporated. She pushed her glass aside and excused herself. Outside, she sat in her car, opened her Venmo. Overdrawn again. No new deposits. Just the empty hum of reality. That night, I sat at my desk with a journal I hadn't touched in years. "Just because someone gave you life," I wrote slowly, "doesn't mean they gave you love. And love without respect is just control in costume." I closed the book, leaned back, and watched the moon climb over the water. A soft knock broke the stillness. I opened the door. Terrence stood there with an envelope in his hand. "I ran a full check," he said. "These are the documents. They tried to shift debt onto you, but it didn't hold. You're clear now." I took the envelope, held it a moment, then placed it on the table beside my journal. "Thank you," I said. "It's time to put everything in writing." His eyes met mine. "It already is." I mailed the last document that morning. Nothing personal, just a clean envelope addressed to Janet Mitchell. Inside, a single sheet, legal-sized, signed by the county registrar and my attorney. I didn't handwrite a note. I didn't owe a note. 3 days later, I heard from Terrence that the envelope had arrived. "She opened it in the kitchen," he said. Lewis read it twice, quietly. Janet just stared at the words like they betrayed her. The letter was plain. Notice of legal separation of joint ownership. Simple font, straight to the point. The next line spelled it out even clearer. All liabilities prior to May 1st are the sole responsibility of Mitchell residents. Apparently, Louis grumbled, "We're not just residents. We're family." And Janet, who used to rehearse every emotion before it ever left her lips, just said, almost to herself, "Not anymore." I didn't need to hear that from them directly. I didn't need a thank you or a why. Sometimes letting people feel the cost of access is the only language they bother to learn. That afternoon, I returned to the studio early. The scent of paint and jasmine from the open window greeted me, calm and grounded. On the walls were canvases in soft golds and deep blues, pieces from the new Fracture and Bloom series. A quiet woman named Marla was arranging extra chairs for the support dinner I was hosting that night. No one wore heels to these things. Nobody brought a bottle of wine for show. It was potluck and honesty, or nothing at all. But before the guests arrived, Terrence walked in, holding his phone with a look that made me put down my mug. "You'll want to see this," he said, handing it to me. Delaney had posted a photo of us, babies in a worn-out stroller, her chubby arm around me, both of us squinting into the sun. The caption, "Abandonment runs in my family. I guess I was never enough." It had already racked up hundreds of reactions, teary emojis, praying hands, comments like, "You deserve better," and "People don't know what siblings carry." But then, buried between sympathy, was a comment from Ms. Ricci, our high school English teacher. "Zoya paid your tuition every semester. Don't rewrite history, sweetie." I exhaled, neither angered nor surprised. That comment wouldn't last. Delaney had always been faster with delete buttons than self-reflection. Still, I knew what to do next. I pulled open the old accordion file in my closet. I'd kept the receipts, not out of bitterness, but accountability. I scanned them in one by one. Her college housing deposit, her braces invoice, the electric bill she ignored for 6 months while finding herself. All signed in my name, paid in full. I posted the collage to my page with just one line beneath it. "Love without boundaries becomes debt." And then I logged off. That night at the fundraiser for the local library, a place my mother loved to flaunt her community involvement, Janet had been invited to give a short speech about literacy. I didn't go, but Terrence did. He told me she stood behind the podium in her usual beige blazer, started with a quivering smile, and then cracked halfway through her opening line. She left us. She was ungrateful. No applause followed, just murmurs. One older woman whispered too loudly, "Didn't she save their house from foreclosure a few years back?" Someone else added, "I heard she paid off their car loan too." Janet left early, her eyes down, her mouth tight. Louis stayed behind, but didn't speak to anyone. Meanwhile, in my own space, laughter was building. We passed casseroles and swapped stories. One woman talked about how her father made her co-sign loans as a teenager. Another spoke of silent birthdays, forgotten year after year. We didn't cry. We nodded. We healed. When someone raised a glass of ginger ale, she said, "To chosen families, the ones that show up because they want to, not because they want access." We clinked our cups and smiled. That's the thing about peace. It's quiet, but it resonates. Later that week, Terrence visited again. He handed me a folder and a smile. "Everything's finalized. No remaining debts, no legal entanglements. You're clean." I took the folder and placed it on my desk, untouched. That night, I lit a candle and set it on the windowsill. Not for mourning. I wasn't grieving them anymore. It was for release, a final gesture of letting go. Delaney's post, I later found, had been flagged for misinformation by the platform itself. Apparently, someone reported it. She lost a sponsorship deal with a wellness brand the same week. I didn't feel joy, just closure. She sent one message, short and biting. "Was it worth it?" I stared at it, letting the words sit. Then I closed the app without replying. Some stories don't need epilogues, they just need to end. At a small nonprofit event a few days later, I was invited to speak about financial abuse within families. I looked out at the room of mostly older women, some in their church dresses, others in denim jackets, arms crossed with eyes wide open. I told them, when we remove obligation, all that's left is who we choose to be. No one cheered, but the applause that came after was the kind that sticks with you, not loud, but real. They can't knock on a door they spent years pretending didn't exist. Terrence handed me the final papers that morning. I folded them without reading, because I already knew what they said. Then I changed my number, not out of anger, not even as a statement. It was just time. By early afternoon, the sun had begun to dip behind the trees outside my studio, casting long shadows across the table where I worked. That was when the delivery arrived. A soft knock on the glass door, and a young courier handed me a small cardboard package. No return address. I recognized the handwriting, though. Janet's was always neat, like she was afraid of making a mistake even when writing my name. Inside, there was an old photo album. Burgundy leather, worn at the edges. A note rested on top. You always loved remembering. I opened it slowly, not because I was eager, but because I was curious what version of the past she had chosen to send. Every page was carefully arranged. Holidays, birthdays, family trips, each smile frozen in time. But I wasn't in them. Not once. There was a space beside a cake where I should have been, a blurred corner in a group photo where I remembered standing, but to anyone else, I was never there. I turned each page with deliberate calm until I closed the album. Then I put it back in the box, sealed it, and left it by the door. That evening, I attended the local charity art auction. My piece was titled Basement Daughter, an abstract blend of deep grays and narrow beams of light escaping through a single crack in the floorboards. A woman, older, dressed in a floral shawl, stood beside me and asked, "Is this about your parents?" I didn't hesitate. It's about being told love is a room you have to earn. She studied it for a moment, then nodded as if understanding something wordless. When the bidding began, she doubled the starting price. The next morning, Terrence walked into my studio with a dusty folder in his hand and a half smile. He didn't sit, just held it out like something sacred. Your father had me draw this up back in 2016, he said, in case you ever needed to walk away. I took the folder and opened it. Inside was a legal document, an emergency provision transferring sole control of the family's insurance trust to me, activated in the event of negligence or abuse, signed and notarized, dated the same week they forgot my birthday. I exhaled quietly. He saw it coming. Terrence nodded. He hoped it wouldn't be needed. Word of the insurance clause spread faster than I expected. Maybe Lewis leaked it. Maybe someone in town connected the dots. Either way, by Sunday morning, Janet was standing at a local church testimonial night, gripping a microphone like it was the only thing keeping her upright. We made mistakes, she said, trembling, but we are still her parents. That should mean something. The room was quiet, but not reverent. Then Pastor Gibson, who'd known me since youth choir days, stepped forward. Love isn't what you say under a microphone, he said calmly. It's what you protect when no one's watching. No one clapped, but no one spoke up for her either. That same night, Delaney uploaded a vlog. Her mascara was streaked, her voice shaking. She left us, she said to the camera. We loved her, and she abandoned us. The comments poured in, but they weren't what she expected. Screenshots appeared, utility payments, college tuition, hospital bills, each signed by me. One commenter wrote, "Real love doesn't come with invoices, but real users always leave trails." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Instead, I unveiled my newest work at a small private gallery showing, a life-size door covered in hand-laid gold leaf, the handle rusted shut. The title, For the Ones Who Called Me a Guest in My Own Life. It sold within 10 minutes to a museum curator visiting from Boston. Back at the studio, I lit a stick of incense and sat by the window. The wind outside was gentle. I opened my journal, not because I had anything profound to say, but because I wanted to see my own words, untouched by revision. They gave me the basement and called it generosity, but a room isn't love, silence isn't peace, and family, it isn't access to the soul you tried to silence. The next morning, I dropped my old phone into a donation bin at the supermarket. Terrence met me outside with a fresh cup of tea and an envelope. "It's done," he said. "They're off everything." I took the envelope, but I didn't open it. I just smiled, walked back inside, and closed the window behind me. No rage, no revenge fantasy, just quiet air. Let them try every door. This home was never built for thieves of spirit. I didn't slam any doors on them, I just made sure they didn't have a key. A week passed after Terrence handed me the final documents. I let the silence breathe, let the dust settle on their schemes. I went back to my brushes, to quiet mornings with black coffee and classical vinyl spinning through my apartment. But peace, it seemed, made them restless. Then came the letter. It was slid under my studio door in a crisp envelope bearing the letterhead of a downtown law firm. The subject line read, Contested access to the Mitchell Family Trust. I didn't flinch. I didn't panic. I just picked up the envelope, set it beside my breakfast plate, and kept eating. I called Terrence later that morning. "They're trying the trust," I said. He sighed on the other end. "Of course they are. I'll meet you there." That Friday, I walked into the lawyer's office wearing linen, not armor. The receptionist greeted me gently, almost apologetically. She knew who I was. And more importantly, she knew who they were. Janet and Louis sat stiffly across from each other at the long conference table. Neither looked up when I entered. Delaney stumbled in late, sunglasses still on, like shame had become a skin she couldn't shed. The attorney, a man named Whitaker, opened a thick manila folder and began. The Mitchell Family Trust is governed by a set of amendments made in 2019. These were signed by the late Leonard Mitchell and initiated by Ms. Zoya Mitchell, who is present. Janet leaned forward, voice sharp. "What amendments? We never heard about any of this." Whitaker didn't look fazed. Clause 17C. The revised terms state, access to the trust is contingent upon continuous direct contribution to the personal welfare, education, or business development of Zoya Mitchell, who is named primary trustee. The room went still. Louis scoffed. "That's absurd. What does that even mean?" I kept my voice calm. "It means this trust wasn't a family piggy bank. It was for growth, not guilt." Whitaker nodded and turned to me. "Ms. Mitchell, if you'd like to present your supporting documentation." I slid the folder across the table, tax filings showing the art residency I'd launched using a portion of the trust, LLC registration for my studio, bank records confirming reinvestment into my education and exhibitions. It was all there, cataloged and signed. Whitaker barely had to read it. "She's already fulfilled the clause. You," he turned to them, "are not listed beneficiaries under these terms." Janet's jaw tightened. We didn't understand. We thought, "No," I interrupted, voice low but unwavering. "You understood plenty. You understood how to give away my bedroom, how to excuse my absence with words like mercy and discipline. You just didn't expect me to read the fine print while you were busy rewriting the rules." Louis opened his mouth to argue, but nothing came. His eyes flicked to Delaney, hoping for backup. She only whispered, "But I'm your sister." I met her gaze. Sisters don't torch the house and then ask for the spare key. She stood abruptly, nearly knocking over her chair, and left. No one moved to follow. The meeting ended without handshakes. Outside, the sky was overcast but dry. Terrence walked beside me to my car, his silence a cushion rather than a void. "You all right?" he finally asked. I opened the door, tossed my purse inside. "You ever sit in a waiting room for most of your life, and then just decide to get up and walk out?" He smiled softly. "Yeah, I've seen it. Today was your day." We didn't need to say more. The ripple effect came quietly, like a shift in wind you don't notice until leaves scatter the porch. Emails to Janet went unanswered. A neighbor who used to drop off wine on Fridays stopped showing up. Delaney's vlog comments, once full of pity, now brimmed with screenshots, receipts, clipped videos of the charity gala, and quotes from pastors who knew better than to fall for Sunday confessions dressed in crocodile tears. I didn't clap back. Instead, I painted. One piece, a heavy iron safe, locked with a faint shimmer of gold beneath the keyhole. I called it Freedom Has Terms. It sold within hours. The buyer was a museum curator from D.C. She didn't haggle. With the last of the legal knots untangled, I began something I'd dreamed of but never dared, founding a scholarship program. It wasn't massive, not yet. But it was mine. I named it the Graham Hope Fund after my father's middle name. It would be for kids like I'd once been, left out, locked away, told that dreams were only for those who'd earned them through obedience. I didn't need revenge, I just needed them out of my story, and to finally write the rest in my own hand. This time, I didn't raise my voice. I raised my boundaries, and that was louder than anything they'd ever heard. The quiet after everything wasn't hollow. It was whole. Not the kind of silence that follows an argument, but the kind that follows closure. I didn't have to speak anymore. I had already said what needed to be said, not with words, but with action, with stillness, with decisions no one could reverse. That morning, sunlight spilled across the floor of my apartment, like it had been waiting for me. The scent of sea air slipped through the barely cracked window, and the world outside was slowly waking up. I wasn't rushing to fix anything. I made my tea, barefoot, humming something old and comforting. Then the email arrived. The subject line read, Mitchell Property, listed. I clicked without hesitation. 4 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, basement, needs significant repair, owner eager to sell. The photos didn't surprise me. Faded paint, an overgrown yard, a living room that once held the echo of a piano I wasn't allowed to touch. I didn't scroll twice. I didn't forward it to anyone. I simply replied, "Accept offer, no counter." That house had never protected me. It was never really mine to return to. Later that afternoon, I stood before a modest podium at the launch of the Graham Hope Fund. The community center had set up folding chairs and a simple stage. No chandeliers, no plaques, just 3 students with trembling hands and open hearts. One young woman stepped up, cleared her throat, and said, "I'm here because someone I never met believed I mattered." I didn't clap. I just smiled. That was more than enough. The next morning, I found a thick envelope in my mailbox. No return address. The handwriting was familiar, slanted and confident. I opened it slowly, hands trembling in a way they hadn't during any of the family meetings. Inside was a card, postmarked 7 years ago. Delayed delivery. My father's name signed at the bottom. Zoya. If they ever forget who you are, here's a reminder. You are the lighthouse, not the lost ship. Love, Dad. I didn't cry for him. I cried with him. For every time I'd stood by the shore of that house and wondered why he didn't protect me louder. Maybe this was his whisper. Maybe it was enough. A few days passed. I stepped into a local cafe, the same one where people used to pause their conversations when I walked in. This time, a woman behind the counter called out, "That piece you did last week? Hit me right in the gut." I laughed genuinely and said, "That's the point." Some days later, Terrence and I sat on a bench that overlooked the coast. The sun was low, casting that late orange glow that makes everything look like forgiveness. "I didn't burn it down," I said, more to myself than to him. He didn't look at me when he answered. "No, you built something better." We sat in silence after that. Not awkward, just the kind you can sit in when someone sees you for who you really are. When I got home, I opened the old envelope again. Took the eviction note my mother once left taped to my bedroom door, creased and crumpled, the ink fading where it had been soaked in my own teenage tears. I mounted it on a canvas board. Below it I placed my father's letter. Title, Then and Now. It hung in my entryway. Not as a scar, but as a symbol. I had walked through that fire barefoot, and not only did I not burn, I planted something new in the ashes. That weekend, I recorded a new episode for the podcast I'd started under the foundation. "Sometimes," I said into the mic, "the people who raise you don't see who you become, and that's okay. You don't have to keep shrinking just because their house still has low ceilings. You don't have to move back into the basement just because they're still standing on the same floor." No music. Just my voice even. Clear. The following Sunday, I taught my first workshop for women over 50, all of them holding sketchbooks, notebooks, or nothing at all but open eyes. Some had been silenced for decades. One woman, with silver hair tucked behind her ears, raised her hand. "Do you ever wish they apologized?" I paused. "No," I said softly. "I just wish they'd listened when I was still soft." The room went still. Then one woman reached out and took another's hand, and as I closed the door behind me at the end of that day, for once it didn't echo, it simply stayed closed.